everybody, my name's Kate. We are here at the Seward House Museum this afternoon, and today we're going to be reading some diary entries from Miss Fanny Seward. Fanny Seward obviously was the youngest child of William and Frances Seward, and she lived from 1844 to 1866. She unfortunately passes away at the age of 21 from tuberculosis and typhoid fever, which is very tragic. She always wanted to be a professional author because she loved to read and write. And she never really got to achieve that goal because she passed away so early. However, she did still leave a legacy because she wrote lots of entries in a diary. And she also wrote lots of letters to family members and friends. So we do still remember her words. And of course, throughout all of her writings, she repeatedly addresses Christmas because this was very important to her. Fanny grows a lot throughout the years. Obviously, when she talks about Christmas, she sees more of politics as she grows up. She also sees the Civil War start. So Fanny's Christmas entries greatly change throughout the years. She writes about Christmas 6 times total. The first time being in 1853, and that is when she is writing a letter to her father, who is gone, as Seward often was during the holidays. Then she writes 5 consecutive Christmas entries from 1858 to 1862 in her diary, and these show a great change as well. But there's also some similarities between all of these entries. We can see that there are holiday traditions that Fanny always celebrates, and we can also see some of the things that she valued and really cared about repeatedly throughout her life, such as reading. Reading always comes up at Christmas time. So today we're going to be reading some of those entries, and Fanny herself will be reading them. So our first entry is going to be the letter when Fanny is 9 years old from 1853.
My dear father, I hope you had a Merry Christmas. We had a Christmas tree, and I had so many things I can hardly tell you. Fred gave me Fanny Fern, and gave Matilda a fairy book. Mother gave me a puzzle of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Mrs. Wadras gave us some peanuts and candy. Mrs. Wharton gave us each an album. Her sisters gave us each a box of bonbons. Willie gave me a little dog, and Matilda a monkey. Auntie gave me the book Contentment Better Than Wealth, and gave Matilda a tea set. Abby gave me a wax figure. Abby's sister gave me a candy heart. Will you please write to me soon? Mother is not very well. Your affectionate daughter, Fanny.
So as you all heard, Fanny is obviously very excited that it is Christmas time, but she clearly misses her father, who is often away because of his career. At this time, he would have been in Washington as a senator. And Fanny and her father are very close, so she clearly misses him a lot. This is also a very childlike perspective. Fanny is, of course, only 9, and she's very infatuated with receiving presents, and that's mainly what she talks about. And 2 of those presents happen to be books, because she loves to read. And one of the presents is also an Uncle Tom's Cabin puzzle, which is sitting right here in our collection. So the next entry we will hear from Fanny is from 1858. This is her very first diary entry.
I woke very early and rose with the sun. After lying awake for some time on coming into my little room, I saw on a chair beside the chimney piece where I hung my stocking a large white box with a beautiful picture on the top. On opening it, I found a most beautiful little theater of paper. I knew at once that it was from my dearest mother and was delighted with it. Dearest, best of mothers. How kind and thoughtful in the top of my stockings was a paper box in imitation of oak, filled with paper actors for, as it announced, the Mingen Theater. Oh, how very, very neat and pretty. Putting my hand further down in, I drew out an elegant purse embroidered with rich flowers. This was from my dear brother Will. Then, in the bottom of my stocking, I found a paper of very nice candy from Kate. I then took my presents to Mother, a crocheted basket and gilded candlestick. Mother carried to Father my gift, and I went to Will's room to wish him a Merry Christmas and leave my presents for him. Kate and I went to church on Dr. Pine's. It was very handsomely decorated with evergreens and laurels. On our way home, we met Miss Howland and Miss Searing, the noble and praiseworthy teachers of the Normal School for Colored Girls. We invited them to dine with us. I must not forget to mention that on Christmas Eve, when I hung up stockings for Kate and I also fastened to the mantel shelf one of my mittens for Belle, in which he received in the next morning no less than 4 dogs on a blue cushion. He seemed to know that it was Christmas morning and capered like a child. Louisa had cooked us a very nice dinner of turkey and plum pudding. In the evening, Kate read the Memoirs of Madame d'Arblay. I amused myself with my new theater. I went to bed at about 10, having certainly spent a very Merry Christmas. One thing seems very strange to me. The Southern custom of firing guns, pistols, crackers, etc., on the day sacred to peace and goodwill towards men, thus celebrating the era of peace with the emblems of war.
So in this past entry, we learned a lot about Fanny's personality. This would have been 5 years past the letter, so Fanny would now be 14 when she writes this entry. And this is, of course, the first entry in her diary because her diary is also a gift, a Christmas gift this year. We learn more about Fanny's family in this, and she also grows up a little bit and talks more about the gifts that she gives and not only the gifts that she receives. We also hear about Fanny's love for poetry because some of her lines are written very poetically. We also see that she really cares about her pets. She mentions her dog Belle, which was one of her favorite pets. And this is also the Christmas where she, of course, gets her paper theater set, which was one of her favorite gifts. And we have that sitting here as well. Fanny also reads out loud with her family once again, because this is a very common occurrence. She's either getting a book for Christmas or she is reading aloud for Christmas every single time. And she also eerily foreshadows future tensions and violence with her last few lines of celebrating peace with violence. So our next entry is going to be the very next year, and that is 1859.
Christmas came on Sunday. Katie and I hung up our stockings. I found by mine a beautiful cologne bottle or vase of blue and white Parian ware from Mother. A very handsome album of rich-colored engravings from Auntie Warden, as well as a very pretty yellow sugar rose with a face peeping out from the leaves. From Mother also a beautiful heart. From Mary Titus, an Italian wax figure and a sweet little China Red Riding Hood. From Ellen Peary, a very rich, heavy chase gold ring, which she afterwards had marked Fanny from Ellen. From Nellie Titus, 2 pretty crocheted collars and some candy from Mother. Belle hung up his stocking, or rather mitten. He received a new red and black collar, some candy, 2 candy dogs, and some of Trip's fur in a paper, as Auntie said Trip had nothing else to give, so he gave that. Belle gave some of his fur to Trip in the morning. Will went to New York Sunday night to be in time to meet Father before he went. He gave Auntie and Mother each a pretty traveling bag, and me a beautiful blue-bound and tinted paper illustrated copy of The Merchant of Venice.
So this 1859 entry is very similar to the 1858 one, with just a few differences. Fanny is still very infatuated with her gifts. That is the main focus of the entry. And we can also see that love of dogs. Again, there's even a dog gift exchange. She is still reading her books. Her father is clearly away in Washington again. But this Christmas is a little bit different because first time she starts mentioning her peers, such as Ellen Perry and Mary Titus. So she's age 15 now, and she's expanding her Christmas group of people that she spends it with and to her social peers, people that are the same age as her. So our next one will be Christmas of 1860.
Miss Hance arrived last evening at a little after tea time. She would spend the holidays with us. I spent the evening at Mary Woodruff's. Molly Titus was there. We made molasses candy, or rather worked it with considerable merriment, but no very uncommon mess. The day was a busy one. For me, getting and distributing gifts. In the evening, Abby and Mary Van Wee called They Brought Me a very curious little man made of nuts, something novel and indigenous, but also a butterfly needle book. For Katie, which I put into her stocking. This morning, at the earliest of the daylight, Mother put into my hands a book from Mary Titus. After some studying in the gray twilight, I made out the title, Bonnie Scotland. Grace Greenwood's last book, a very welcome gift to one of the writer's ardent admirers. After breakfast, I gave my presents to the family. Gray LG's illustrated on tilted paper to Mother, etc. Katie's stocking was very satisfactory to her. She is a good girl and deserved every item in her well-filled hose. Miss Hance and I went to church. The chants were read and the psalm and hymn sung without music from the organ. Mr. Platt's sermon was shorter and better than usual. Aunt Clara, Katie, and the baby, Mr. and Mrs. Austin came to dinner. Will and Jenny took dinner at Mrs. Pomeroy's. Part of the dinner time I sat with Clarence in the nursery. He is a good dear little baby, almost 6 months old. There was a dancing school this evening and afternoon, and at Mr. Brown's school this evening, a Christmas tree filled by scholars for scholars and teachers. All who had ever attended the institution were invited to attend, and Mary Holmer and Emily Williams came expressly to invite me and urged my attendance warmly. But I did not go to either tree or dancing school for 3 reasons. First, Miss Hance being here disliked to leave. Second, Katie and Aunt Clara were here for the afternoon. Third, I did not feel well, and I was not strong enough for walking or dancing. Miss Hance and I spent the evening together, reading aloud in Scott's Private, and crocheting, I in a set of mats and pincushions for a toiletry table. I went to sleep a little after 12.
So this is the last really long entry that Fanny writes about Christmas that is solely focused on the festivities and the holiday. This happened when she was 16 years old, and we can still see some similarities but some greater maturity from her. She is still talking about her gifts. She receives another book. They read out loud. Her governess comes to visit, and she loves spending time with her clearly. Fanny also attends church, which was something that the family regularly did on the Christmas season as well. However, we can see some new actions from Fanny, such as Fanny starts talking about the goodness of people in this entry, which is something that she commonly does throughout her diary. Fanny is very idealistic and has a very strict set of morals, which she lives by, and she often comments in her diary, not just during Christmas, but throughout, about how she judges things, people and books, based on how good or bad she thinks that they are. So we can hear her doing this a little bit in this entry. We can also see that Fanny's grown up a lot. She's now helping to take care of little baby Clarence. And she also makes a decision to not go to a fun dance that is in the evening. Instead, she stays back because she wants to make sure her guests and her family members aren't alone or feel awkward by themselves if she would go out. So our next entry will be 1861.
On returning home, I thought it not worthwhile to continue my journal here. where every day is some memorable occurrence, I shall try to do so. My diary of last winter at home is so full of trivial notes that I am half vexed with myself for chronicling so many little events of everyday life, and would be inclined to throw away the whole were it not mingled their interest. What can look more egotistical a year after than one's own diary filled with what I did? However, perhaps it's well enough to occasionally look over the pages and find how I spend a pleasant winter in Auburn. The day before Christmas, Anna and I went to carry to an Orange County regiment 5 pairs of socks knit by an old lady of that county. I saw the surgeon and left them with him. The regiment were on drill. Christmas, a bright, beautiful day. Before breakfast, Mother handed me the Roman pearl pin she had intended giving me, a Bible and Phila, and, as she had not had the time, said I must not go without anything. Father went to a cabinet meeting. Anna and I attended church at Dr. Pine's. The church was pretty, with its green trimmings and the singing horrible. In the afternoon, Anna gave me a beautiful photograph album bound in light brown morocco. Father came home after 3 and had the carriage at 4 for a drive. We drove to Capitol Hill to find Captain Kendy's artillery company. Afterward, inquiry and encountering informants of all degrees. Father's question as to the whereabouts of the companies was answered with a will by the handsome young soldier. Here they are, sir, right here, and there's the captain. That individual was engaged with his men in moving some of the appendages of the camp. He came up to the carriage with salutation, not welcome in fact. The man seemed afraid, lest we should have the benefit of seeing his company or should be tempted to stay and make him call. Father asked for the men's welfare. I suppose Kennedy meant nothing, but was discomposed because we did not find everything all right in the camp, where they were moving tents, etc. However, all this fault-finding I do on my own responsibilities. After tea, Father proposed that he should go and see Mrs. Marcy and her little dog. Mrs. Marcy, Mrs. McClellan's mother, is living with the McClennans, as is Senator Marcy. Miss Marcy was at home. She said that General McClellan was confined to his room, indeed to his bed, except for a few moments at a time, by a severe cold. General Marcy had the real typhoid fever. The dog was still flourishing, I believe. Pretty soon, a married sister of General Marcy's came down, accompanied by Fanny Marcy. Grown. Oh, how much I liked Fanny. She's intelligent, with great vivacity. Mrs. Marcy told Father during conversations that she thought he had but little ambition, that his honor seemed thrust upon him, and she believed his plan to keep a peculiar conscience. Mrs. McClellan came down at the last of our stay. I had no conversations with her. I should not call her pretty, but attractive.
So this entry shows a bit of a stark difference compared to past entries, because the Civil War has started now, and Fanny has clearly shifted in tone, not just for Christmas, but throughout all of her diary entries in 1861. She has a much wider view of the things that are going on around her, and you can tell that most of this Christmas entry, while it's still focused on Christmas Day, it is talking about the war effort a lot and how she was engaged with that. This is also the first and only Christmas entry where Fanny is spending her time in Washington, D.C., and we can tell that she is very engaged in the politics that her father is engaged in. She is accompanying him to visiting soldiers, General McClellan's house. So we can still tell that there is a bit of a focus on gifts, but that's clearly not the main thing about Christmas anymore. In fact, Fanny's mother, Frances, even tells her that she gives her present because she must not go without anything. So that clearly shows there's a change in what is important. Fanny also recognizes that, and she starts her entry talking about how egotistical and trivial her notes from the last winter seem now, that there's such a bigger conflict going on. But she's now more aware, and she spends Christmas Eve On Christmas Day, she still spends time with the family and people she cares about, but she also goes and visits a camp, and she talks about what she thinks of the camp. You can also tell that she's experiencing some of the political tension that is surrounding her when she talks about visiting Mrs. Marcy and talking about how Miss Marcy clearly does not like her father and his politics. But we do still see in this entry that Fanny cares about dogs because she is very concerned about the welfare of Mrs. Marcy's dog because everybody else in the house is sick. Our final entry is going to be from 1862. Fanny is now 18 years old in this final entry.
Christmas Day, I meant to have gone to Miss Pomeroy's, where I was invited to a meeting of Jenny's family. Mrs. Pomeroy had come home for the holidays. I also wanted to hear Train, who lectured that night, but I was unable to go out and spent the day in my room. Mary Titus and Esther Perry spent the time alternately with me and made my Christmas very cheerful. Mary gave me Mr. Browning's last poems, and Esther was making for me a pretty bow of white lawn and lace, a new fashion. They were both very kind and considerate to an invalid. Miss Bennet was there during the day, and Abby in the evening.
Although you can't really tell from the excerpt that Fanny just read, Christmas is clearly no longer the focus of Fanny's life. And we can see why she didn't continue writing about Christmas, even though she experienced 3 more later on. This small excerpt is part of a much longer diary entry where Fanny's not focused on Christmas at all. In fact, Christmas is just an afterthought for her here in 1862. Most of her entry is focused on her worry about her father and politics, because around this time there are rumors swirling that Seward might be resigning and coming back to Auburn. So she doesn't know if her father is finishing his career and coming home or not. And she writes multiple pages about this. It's clearly what she is caring about. She no longer really focuses on gifts at all. She still wants to spend the season with her friends, and she still clearly has a very good time on Christmas, even though she hardly mentions it. She also still receives her book of poetry, which shows that that is still a continuing passion. But Fanny is sick most of this time, so she can't do really much else on Christmas Day. And this is also something that was common throughout Fanny's life. She was often sick, which partly led to her early death just a few years later from tuberculosis. So we can clearly see from all of these entries that Fanny had some continuous passions throughout her life, such as her love of dogs, her love of reading, and she genuinely cared about the people around her. Throughout these entries, she brings the focus from herself to the family and friends around her, to the whole country around her, so she really expands on that. And we can tell that she definitely grows in maturity. And even in her last entry, when her father might be resigning, when the Civil War is raging on, and when she herself is confined to her bed for multiple days, being very sick, she still describes Christmas as being cheerful. So we hope that all of your holidays are cheerful as well. If you would all like to come to Candlelight, that would be amazing. We have 6 more nights of our Candlelight tours. They happen at 6 and 7. We have them tonight and tomorrow and on Sunday night as well as next week. And I hope that you all have a very Merry Christmas from me and from Fanny.